Julie. Thank you, everyone, for being on this call, and a warm welcome from the American Muslim Multi-Faith Women's Empowerment Council, the Muslim women speakers, and the coalition of Muslim women who have come together and are working together for change, for transformation, to promote unity, to promote American values in the United States and beyond. My name is Soraya Dean. I'm an executive member of the American Multi-Faith Muslim Women's Empowerment Council, and I'm also the founder of the Muslim Women Speakers Movement. We strongly believe that Muslim women's voices particularly is a time that needs to be uplifted and celebrated and listened to. My background is that I was born in Sri Lanka. I have to say this to you today, in a very conflict-ridden country. We were in a civil war for 30 years. My life was severely disrupted growing up. I saw my friends and colleagues being killed, being arrested, being imprisoned, losing their homes. But there was one thing we learned growing up, and that was in my home, in most of our homes, we were not taught to hate. So I come to this space of war and violence with a very privileged background in that we were not indoctrinated to hate. So this morning, or maybe afternoon and evening, for some of you, we are going to engage in a very specific topic. We're going to talk about the humanitarian impact of suffering, particularly of people in Israel after October 7th. I was watching this movie that Chava has produced, this documentary. A little boy taught me a profound lesson that I was thinking all through last night and this morning. He said, think about 12 seconds. How many of us take for granted 12 seconds? Why in 12 seconds, if I really time you, let us just take 12 seconds, really. Yeah, 12 seconds. So what he taught and shared was that in 12 seconds, he was told he had to run to a bomb shelter because of Hamas rockets that are being fired relentlessly. And where he grew up, I believe was Sterot, where Anila and I, we have both been there and we have seen the carnage. He was told that he had 12 seconds to run to a bomb shelter. And he said, in that 12 seconds, we as people who have so much privilege and opportunity, we can love somebody, we can do something nice, we can reach out to somebody, we can start something. So my friends, today as we go home, let us remember the message of the 12 seconds and not take anything for granted, because in approximately 452 million children are living in conflict zones, and almost half, roughly 80% million are forcibly displaced people worldwide, and half of them are children. So we have to keep that in mind as we come here to talk about why Chava had to produce this documentary. The order of the day would be that I'm going to call on Chava first to share her insights. Then I'll call on the Sheikh Musa, and then Anila Ali will share some perspectives. Because we, as Muslim leaders, we have to learn to embody a lot of resilience. And when I met Chava, this movie, when I saw it the first time, I had such an epiphany, an aha moment, and a grief moment of sorrow and reflection. Because we think when it comes to the war, it's all about one person winning and one person losing, and it's about weapons and who is right and might. But we sometimes often fail to understand how much people are suffering. So I want to lay a little bit of groundwork for why we are having this discussion. We saw that on October 7th, Hamas went from door to door rounding up kibbutz members and control the community for 17 hours. It killed attendees of the Noah festival and killed kibbutz members. One person said they shot indiscriminately, abducted whoever they could, burnt down people's homes so they don't have to escape through the window where the terrorists would wait. And it was pure and simple massacre. So who are the victims of these massacres? Who are the survivors? Have we thought of them? Today we know 1,200 Jews were killed. 250 was taken as hostages and many murdered and their bodies are mutilated. Bodies not even released. And at this moment, I want to make a strong call that all hostages should be released. The world has failed. The world has failed to acknowledge the civilian displacement in Israel. Over 200,000 Israelis have been displaced. And the pro-Palestinian movement has also failed to acknowledge the displacement and suffering of the Palestinians. They have not called for the release of the hostages and an end to war, but they're engaged in a publicly glorified Jew hatred and a propaganda and anti-Semitism and are relentless calls for an intifada. So let us not forget the suffering of the Palestinians that are perpetuated by the continuation of not releasing the hostages. And my friends, in this moment comes filmmaker like Chava. She speaks to just that in her award-winning documentary, Resilient. I first met her on a podcast interview. I saw the documentary and I realized, as I told you before, not enough is talked about the people who are displaced and people who are traumatized and the families and the survivors. So Chava, you are a somatic healer. You have said that if you heal yourself, you can heal generations before you and generations after you. And your film, we'll watch a short clip here before you speak, Chava, and your film emphasizes the message that we must all develop the skill to remember and the skill to forget. Before you speak, let us watch a small trailer from your movie. Thank you, Julie, if you will play that now. We can't hear. Julie, would you mind rewinding and having volume on? We can't hear.
Hey, Sarai, it's working on the live stream. I think it's a panelist.
Sorry. Okay. Yeah, I hear some no sounds. Thank you. Thank you, Julie. I think many people didn't hear. Maybe it's a good message that we all need to have more screenings and go and commit to watching it. So, Chava, before you said also, um, forgetting helps you flourish, give you new wings, and that you said was the form of resilience. So, please tell us who you are, why you made this movie, and what did you learn that you want the world to know about the people of Israel. Thank you.
Thank you, Soraya. Thank you again for having me on this wonderful panel and for all the work that Anila and Sheikh Musa do. And I know that they didn't get like introduced, but for those of you who are tuning in for the first time, these are really beautiful advocates for peace, for Israel, and they risk their lives every day to spread the word of love. And I don't take that lightly, and I appreciate all of you so much. Um, so this is the reason why I ended up going on this uh, journey was that I'm a somatic healer here in Los Angeles. I also work out of a wellness center in Miami called the Center Wellness Center. And one of the things that I recognized was right after the war started, there were lots of families here in Los Angeles who were really dealing with relatives overseas that were like in the midst of the conflict. Parents whose children were in the midst of the conflict, families who were coming here like right after the conflict, like literally a week or two after the conflict, who had actually been residents of different kibbutzim that were really traumatized that because of my role in the community, I ended up having a lot of interface with and had created special programming for them to be able to have like just some reprieve. And I recognized that this was going to be a really big problem for, especially for the Jewish community, for the Israeli population, even for the American Jews who were dealing with like constant barrage of anti-Semitism. So I started an organization to help bring healing and bring people together. And we had a lot of wonderful therapists who, one of them you saw in the film, Ilan Javanfard, who actually was one of our volunteer therapists in our group. We started a WhatsApp chat, and the goal was to create a space for people to be able to, come together and find ways to heal together and to be heard and not to feel alone. And the night before one of my support groups, Elon called me and said, I can't be there next week at the next one because I'm going on a mental health mission to Israel with 20 other mental health professionals, and we could use a somatic healer. I think you should come. This was like Saturday night. He was leaving Wednesday. And I spoke with the head of the organization, Ruchama Kaplan, who's like an amazing human being. And she started an organization in New York City for mental health, combating mental health for mothers and fathers and families. Her organization is called Mask. I actually happen to know her. And so when I called her, she's like, Chava, I have one slot left and you're on it. So I left 3 days later for Israel in the middle of the war. And I've been a filmmaker for over 25 years. So the night before I left, I just had this literally, it was a divine download where I said, I know Israel, and there are so many stories there. And I'm going to see so many different perspectives around how people are moving through this crisis. And I want to understand from a human perspective, from a human level, what is the trauma and what are we going to do to unearth our own healing? And within 24 hours, I had most of the documentary funded, a big portion not funded. We're still a little under our funding. So anybody that would like to participate, let me know. And as a result, we, within 24 hours, had gotten together a crew and we went out in the field for 2 weeks to different various areas where the war was ongoing and really wanted to have a better understanding of what is the trauma that's happening amongst victims and how it's impacting families and children. And really, I thought to myself, this is a timeless story, right? Because even 20 years from now, there's going to be people going through crisis and they're going to want to learn how people who have sustained ongoing crisis for millenniums, like over centuries, right? Like the Jewish people have consistently sustained tremendous opposition. In fact, today is actually Yom HaShoah, which I want to acknowledge. It's Holocaust Remembrance Day, where 6 million Jews were exterminated and murdered just for being Jewish in Europe 80 years ago. And so this is nothing new to my community, you know. What's interesting about my background is I didn't come from a family that suffered from the Holocaust because my family came to America in the early 1900s. All of my family, and I talk about this in the film, all of my family, my grandparents, they were all in World War II as World War II veterans. So they weren't survivors of the war, they were heroes of the war, but they also had tremendous impact of trauma as a result of what they had seen on the front lines, right, fighting the Nazis. And so my grandfather, and I talk about this in the film, who was a lieutenant corporal in the United States Army, he was a Marine, he was a Ranger. He, if he would have been alive, would have won the Gold Medal of Honor. He had taken such an impact. He had such severe PTSD. My grandmother used to tell me he'd wake up in the middle of the night, like just completely frazzled, thinking he was in the middle of the war. And he served on one of the most like elite units called the Merrill's Marauders. If you look them up, they're like an incredible unit of the United States Army. And they did like almost all of their soldiers had either died in battle or shortly after because of the toll it took on them. And my grandfather was 42 when he died and left my grandmother a widow with 3 small kids. My dad was 9. And so I really understand, like I was born into a family understanding grief. Like I could feel my father's grief from the minute I took my first breath. And I always knew that it kind of followed him around. And so I understood, like from a very young age, how trauma impacts an entire family generationally. And I think that's why I've kind of gone on this journey myself, is I've gone through a lot of different traumas in my life. And I've written extensively about resilience. My book, Everything's Gonna Be Okay, How to Nurture Yourself During a Storm, really talks about ways in which we can like move through crisis. That's been sort of my speaking point and something that I've been like deeply invested in understanding for probably the last decade, I would say. And I think that, you know, this is, like you said, Soraya, this is a human crisis. You know, we're living in a post-pandemic world. And in a post-pandemic world, we're seeing a tremendous rise of mental health trauma. And coupled with what we're seeing as the problem is also a tremendous rise in incredible solutions and holistic approaches to those solutions. And it's always been my dream to have more conversations around this topic because it affects everyone equally. It affects the Palestinian people, it affects the Israeli population, it affects children on both sides of the aisle. And while my film is really geared towards highlighting the Israeli conflict and how it's affected the Israeli population, I truly am also interested in how it is affecting the Palestinian families and children and family structure also. It's my goal and my dream to be able to tell that story one day. But for right now, I think that as we move through this, it's going to take a village, you know, which is why I'm so pleased to be on this panel, of us having these tough conversations where we can say, what are ways that we can combat this ailment that's really pulsing through all of our families as a result of ongoing wars, pandemics, uncertainty, financial uncertainty, global uncertainty, and how is it impacting us? And what are ways we can figure that out together?
Thank you. Thank you, Chava. You know, I'm a mother myself. My son is just got selected to attend college. And I was just thinking, really, you know, from a distance, we can talk about a hostage child. But just imagine if you really step into the boots of that mother or the father or the family. So at this moment, I want to remember Idan Alexander. What is his mother going through? Do we even think of that? What about Rachel Goldberg? When we met her in Israel, Anila led a delegation. We met her and we said, we will speak for your son, but he's no more. What about Mireille, whom we met, Anila knows, and our Muslim women delegation, we know this. Her mother was butchered right in front of her house. And Mireille stands to tell us that story, how on October 7th, her mother stood by the door. Her husband was, she told her husband and the grandson to hide. And she said, I was alone. And they butchered her. Then Amit, who is here in the United States, I believe, she won the Courage of the Woman Award. What is her trauma? What about Mr. Shamriz, whom we met? He had in his kibbutz started a Gaza fund to support Gazans who were coming to work in its kibbutz. And I still remember his face. He said, that was utter hypocrisy. I cannot believe they did this to us, because these were people who came to work in their homes and they got the information, passed it on. Then what about the victims who survived to tell the stories? Screams before in the movie, Screams Before Silence. We met many of those young girls who heard women being raped. What is their trauma? Who is going to talk about that? And for me, coming from a Muslim background, we met Mr. Hamad, who he's a Muslim. His wife, who was they were driving in the car with their 1 year old baby, I believe, 1 year or a few months, and the terrorist shot 35 bullets into her. So who is counseling Mr. Hamad? The world is broken, and what I clearly see is there are people like whom I mentioned and more. Their wounds are never shown on the body, but they're deeper and more hurtful than anything that bleeds. Yes, and at this moment, the question I want to ask you is, I acknowledge the pain and the suffering of Palestinian mothers who have lost children, not one or two, but sometimes 5, 10. And you just mentioned that you would love to work with them and highlight their stories. Um, what do you think do they need? And because whatever said and done, they have to be the peace partners we have to work with moving forward. What do they need in this moment?
What do they need? I think only they can really tell us, you know? I would imagine that they probably need to have their voices amplified so that we could understand what it is that they need, you know? And I would imagine that they need a lot of compassion. And there's been a lack of compassion on both sides of the aisle. You know, people are really trying to just make a point that they are right. But what they're not recognizing is that everybody's losing in this war, you know? That's what war is. War is where everybody loses, essentially. There's no winners in a war. And so at the same time, we also have to recognize, you know, we have to know why we're here. Like, what's the purpose of being alive? What's the purpose of having our taking every breath every morning? You know, there was this wonderful person that I interviewed in the film who actually came from the Ukraine. And why am I blanking on his name at the moment? He was the cutest. It'll come to me in a second. I don't know why. Morning time. And he came from Ukraine, and all of his friends were in the war in the Ukraine. And I said, why would you come to Israel to just fight in another war? And he said, because Israel is the strongest people in the world. There's so much resilience here, you know? And I said, well, how do you deal his wife, by the way, is stuck in Ukraine. He's trying to bring her over to Israel. And he's separated from her and they talk every day. And I said, like, well, what do you do to like move through difficult times? And it was like my favorite line in the whole movie, because it was so simple and it was so sweet. Have a coffee, have a cigarette. You know, it's like it's the sweet, like easy, beautiful moments of life that we can sort of like savor in. And unfortunately, when we see these families who are moving through war, there is very little of that happening. And so we take for granted living in places where we don't have constant barrage of rockets. We take for granted in places where we're not constantly running to a bomb shelter because we're afraid. And we have to realize that we have to tap into, just the sweet moments of life, having a coffee, having a cigarette,
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. And okay, thank you so much for your insights. I could listen to you more, but we have time constraints. Our next speaker will be Sheikh Musa. He's from the Bronx. I met him. I've heard so much about him, but I met him when he convened a community gathering, a historic gathering for healing and reconciliation, and he brought together parents of hostages and parents of released hostages. And I know, Sheikh, you work within a diversity of Muslims, diversity of Muslim thought, and it must not be easy for you to navigate the differences of opinion. And how do you hold your community get together and advance your leadership as you advance the leadership of people who are with you? Thank you.
Thank you, Soraya. Thank you, my fellow panelists, and thank you to all the participants. My name is Sheikh Musa Drame. I am from the Gambia, West Africa, but I call New York City home. My wife and I are both investment bankers who work on Wall Street for our own bank until 9/11. After 9/11, our world changed as the world changed in general. And we decided that Wall Street was no longer a place for us. Let's go back to the Bronx and let's change the world for the better. From 9/11 until this very moment, I can honestly tell you that our full-time job is to convince the Muslim world to recognize the state of Israel, just like they recognize all the other states. When I was growing up in the Senegambia, there were two campaigns that were 7 days a week, 365 days, and you must be part of them or you're not African. One was apartheid in South Africa. The other one was Palestine. We didn't know anything about it, but we were part of it. We were part of pro-Palestinian movement, pro-anti-apartheid, and all my life. But it was just rehearsal as a young kid. I did not have the significance of what they were until 9/11. When 9/11 happened, then I realized how deep the problem of Palestine is to the world, especially to the Muslim world. And 7 months following 9/11, I went back to school to really study who I was, what was Islam, what was my purpose in it, and how can I be a better person. For 7 months, I can honestly tell you, I was without a religion. I did not want to hear anything about Islam, no Muslims, no conference. People who knew me then, they knew how radical I was with anger. I was deeply, I was wounded. I cannot describe how angry I was with 9/11 because as an investment banker who knew World Trade Center as much as I know everything else, to see it that way was something I could not imagine. And then coming from my own community, my people that share my faith, was something I couldn't tolerate. So anyway, we decided that, since Palestine, Israel is the problem, then we have to fix it. And, we took on the journey of not just building Muslims and Jews. That was not our goal. Our goal was recognition of the state of Israel by Muslims. We said that is our sole goal because when we fix that, Muslims and Jews have always lived together, have always worked together, and have always, nurtured their common history, their, shared experiences. They cannot be separated, but unfortunately, the last 70 years, with the, with the state of Israel, has become, almost irreparable harm, between the relationship. So that is what brought me here today. And that is what keeps me from sleeping. And that is my mission. Before I talk about Palestinian problem, I want to make sure that the first step is the Muslim world to recognize Israel as they recognize all the other United Nations members. And we have been doing all that we can. Now, in the beginning, it was tough. People thought that we were anti-Muslim, with our religion. Why would you support Israel? But I can honestly tell you, 10 years, we have done a remarkable job in staying close, and we have recruited so many like-minded people, and I'm happy about it. Thank you for inviting me here, and what I can do to answer any question, I'll be more than happy to do it. Thank you, Soraya.
Thank you, Sheikh Musa. Wow, what a powerful testimony. And that's exactly what we are trying to do. First looking inwards, Dr. King always said the concept of moral reciprocity. We have to first fix the brokenness within the community, and building our community is really critical. And thank you for that, what you do. So my question to you, Sheikh, is that you are a graduate of the New York City Police Department, and you are also a citizen of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Citizens Academy. And you founded two highly successful pro-law enforcement days, National Public Safety Honor Day. With the conversations that went around with the Black Lives movements and trying to defund the police, how did you hold both truths together?
Great question. One thing about my Islamic background is law and order, public safety. And, all my life, I have been a community organizer since I was 8 years old. And public safety is my number one domain in organizing, the people around me. So when I came to New York, because the United States is so much intertwined with race that people become dysfunctional because of race issue. Even a crime that would have been deemed regular crime, if different race commits it, it becomes racialized. And that became the problem between law enforcement and the community that they serve, predominantly, Black and brown. And for that, I decided that in order for us to really maintain public safety and quality of life and build bridges, we have to build the relationship between law enforcement and the communities in which they serve, which is predominantly minority. And that brought me, to One Police Plaza. For the past 32 years, every police commissioner we've had, I sat down with them and I told them my interests and I told them my goals. And then after that, I went to the public and worked, to cement the relationship. When Black Lives Matter was launched, and it became a dominant platform for pretty much anti-law enforcement. What should have been empowering Black people became anti-law enforcement. And, we convened meetings. We said, no, we cannot misuse this platform. There is the real reason why Black Lives Matter came, and it must be honored. Just like Me Too movement, real reason it came. However, we cannot use it as anti-law enforcement platform. Therefore, we're gonna set up a sister organization, and we call it a National Public Safety Honor Day, where every December, we honor law enforcement on a fourth Tuesday. And it has become one of the most successful programs in New York City, where minorities who would have been anti-law enforcement are honoring their law enforcement communities, because we cannot misconstrue our grievances and substitute it to anti-law enforcement. These law enforcement, they come from our community, and their only job is to protect us. Now, there are some of them like anywhere else you go in the world. Bad apples. But those bad apples do not represent the majority, the overall majority of law enforcement whose only goal is to save lives and bring public safety. And that is what brought me to the work that I do with law enforcement.
Thank you so much. Powerful message. It is that level of clarity and depth that Anila has. She's our next speaker. And she's a friend, a colleague. We work together. In fact, she supports almost all my initiatives. So when Anila said, no anti-Americanism, this glorified anti-Semitism on our streets are wrong, she took a very, very bold stand, a courageous stand. I know personally she has several death threats. But Anila, when we started and where we are now in terms of what is happening in the Middle East is different. Today, Gazans are speaking up. There is a little scope of civic dialogue and collaboration in the Middle East. So can you please share with us why have you taken this strong leadership role, and what do you want to see happen?
Thank you, Soraya, and I want to thank you for bringing our panel together again with this excellent documentary that I urge everyone to see, and I hope that we can also screen it at going forward. So thank you, Chava, for sharing that and your brave work in documenting it. It's very important to document things. We have learned that because, Soraya, you remember, you and I, when we were told that Israel makes everything up, 9/11 was blamed on the Jews. And so Israel made up October 7th. And when we heard those cries in our community, we looked at them in horror and we said, no, 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 no. We are going to go and bear witness to what happened so we can come back and no one will challenge us. We saw it with our eyes. Sadly, what we saw was heartbreaking, heart-wrenching. And like Chava, you were saying, it was just innocent people just living there, that it was such a holy day for the Jewish people and for us. Sheikh would agree with me that Torah is our book too. And that was Simchat Torah on October 7th. And people were just praying and being happy. And those young people, just like our kids here in America, they were enjoying a peaceful, whatever musical festival. But we know that it was planned. And we know that it was planned because we were winning. Abraham Accords was bringing Arabs and Israelis together. And we know that it was it was the forces of evil that do not want us to come together. They don't want us to come together as Muslims and Jews, and they don't want us to come together as people of moral compass, people with a conscience, standing up to, you may call it Islamism, you may call it extremism, but whatever it is, it divides people, it's toxic. And we saw it after 9/11. Soraya remembers, we were the Muslim women mothers. And we got up and we said, no, 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 no. We know what we're hearing in our mosques. We're hearing calls for jihad. This America, and Brother Musa, they were calling for FBI. Don't talk to the FBI. Who are we going to talk to? That's our country. And every time we stood with law enforcement, what were we called, Soraya? We were called agents of CIA, FBI, you name it. And we said no. In the first face of adversity, there were brave men who stood with us, of law enforcement. Chief Michael Downing, FBI chief, he was Mike Bowditch, he stood with us. Christopher Wray at that time. Many brave, courageous American leaders stood with us. And then we had the faith communities after 9/11 who were standing with us. It was the Jewish community. They gave us the courage. So many times they gave us the platform, and we built our organizations with them, with guidance from them sometimes on how to tackle Islamophobia. And all of this was happening while millions and billions of dollars were being funded into the United States. by organizations like the Council on American Islamic Relations, by Islamic Relief. These are Muslim Brotherhood outfits in America. And we as Muslim mothers who were working on countering violent extremism, because we had heard the cries of mothers. There was a mother who told me, she called me and she said, my daughter wants to join ISIS. She was in a liberal school, Ivy League, 15 years ago. And I said, oh my gosh, she had never been to India, Pakistan. She's a Pakistani girl. She'd never been anywhere. And all of a sudden, she wanted to fight jihad. And where would she go? She would go to Palestine. At that time, she was saying she's going to go to Palestine. This was a planned effort to take over the values that we all share. These are human values. In America, we live as the freest Muslims in the world. We can be Shia, we can be Sunni, we can be, hijabi, we can be whoever we want to. And this movement that is going against our country, people of Abraham that we love, this is toxic. And unfortunately, we, Sheikh Musa, Suraya, and Anila, we cannot fight the billions of funds that have come into it from the Iranian regime, from Muslim Brotherhood. All these outfits, they have been funding our Muslim Students Association. So when we go there, they say, oh, sister, there is no empowerment in Islam of women. Can you imagine a young person who is a Muslim, comes out of a liberal, moderate mosque, stands up to me and says, auntie, there is no empowerment of Muslims in Islam, Muslim women. And I said, my young fellow, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, his wife was his boss. So don't you tell me that. Sit down and listen. Have the courage to listen to a different point of view. So what I want to say, Sheikh Musa, this movement that you are seeing against the Jewish people, against the people of faith, against our country, against all the values we chose America for, this is not new. This is the same Al-Qaeda morphing into the anti-Semitism, morphing into different forms, using anti-Semitism, using anti-Americanism, and creating the chaos that you see on campuses. It is to divide all of us. But we are stronger than that. We are more resilient. And until we have women like us and brothers like Sheikh Musa, and I do believe, I'm so happy to say that there are many Muslim imams like Sheikh Musa. Perhaps they were a little on the sidelines. They have joined their sisters. We are not alone today, and we will not be alone tomorrow until we are speaking the truth. We love this country. And by God, this country is the best country in which to be a Muslim, and they are taking it away from us. And by they, I mean the forces that are against all of us. But unfortunately, it is hard for us to fight that. It is very hard for us to fight that because we don't have that kind of funding.
Thank you, Anila. Beautifully said. I think hurt people. Getting back to the point of the trauma that we are talking, the trauma that they have is manifesting in a level of hatred for this country and manifesting in a level of a lack of sympathy for the people who are suffering. But big things need to happen. I believe in debiasing individuals. I also believe in debiasing organizations. So but the question to you, Anila, is, just yesterday we heard the Pahalgam attack in Kashmir in India. It was done by terrorists, very similar to the violence that was perpetrated on the Jewish people on October 7th. Very similar. It was extremely brutal. The Indian politician today said, Indian politician who is a Muslim, he urged Indian Muslims to wear a black band during Friday Jummah prayer to condemn Pakistani's Lashkar-led cowardly Pahalgam. Pahalgam attack, he said, shows and show solidarity with the Indians. Now, this wearing these bands and, uttering words of solidarity, I think we need something more. So my question to you is, Anila, what is lacking in the Muslim leadership in America today? The universities are hijacked. there's a public outplay and a display of American anti-Americanism and anti-Semitism. They are both linked. Where is the Muslim leadership? And who are they?
We are the Muslim leadership. You know, you are the one who told me when there's no leadership, you are a leader. So we are the leadership, and I'm proud of our leadership. I feel that we really have to do like a rebranding of who are the Muslim leaders in America. Well, they have failed us. And so we need new leadership. The Shura Council, they have always been, from the time of 9/11, they have been against America. They have been against law enforcement, any kind of cooperation with law enforcement. They would call it profiling. No, it's not profiling. It's securing the future of our children. So I want to say something. I am deeply devastated about the terrorist attack in Kashmir, Indian Kashmir. And for me, it's a deep, dark reminder of the day, October 7th, when this happened, and I saw the Muslim community coming out and saying, oh, it never happened. Oh, they deserved it. All of that made me think about something. There will be copycat attacks by terrorists, that this is going to become the modus operandi. And unless we call it out, which alhamdulillah we did, this is going to become the way forward. These are the tactics, okay, of Muslim Brotherhood, which is the ideology of Sayyid Qutb. This is the 12th century, very evil ideology that Muslim clerics, they rejected it. This is burning human beings, cutting them, decapitating them. You know, this whole thing, Chava, I don't know if you know, but this whole thing about taking dead bodies and raping them, and taking dead bodies and killing them and mutilating them, that was a practice of Arabia before the Prophet of Islam came. And that's where this whole thing is coming in from. And people are reviving it to create chaos in communities. And we have to call it out. So we don't know who the people are, who are the perpetrators. That is for Pakistan government and Indian government to work it out. But God knows, do we need another conflict? No. We need more people coming out and saying that we need more peacemakers, we need more bridge builders, and we need tough action on extremism, Islamism. We need tough action on Islamist ideologies being taught in American mosques. Why aren't Muslims standing up? I have to tell you something. This Ramadan was it was depressing for me, because I was getting calls from young Muslims, and they were saying, I heard in the mosque that I have to do jihad. I'm not a Muslim if I don't do jihad for Gaza. And I just feel like that's not why I want to go to the mosque. And then young Muslims calling and saying, our friends are, telling us in Arabic that we have to, do jihad and hate the Jews and hate the Christians. This is what's happening in our mosque. So where do these young people go? In 2015, we had said our young people need safe spaces, but today's mosque, they don't even allow, us to come and give a talk about how to be a good Muslim in America, how to be a patriotic American in America. Sheikh Musa will know that. Every time after 2015, I would go to a mosque, and I was sent by the president at that time to do my job. CARE and other organizations, they would stop me, harass me, heckle me. They followed me till my home. So what am I to do but say, we need to change that? As far as the attacks on Kashmir, that is a copycat attack. And whoever the terrorists are, they're being inspired. This is an inspiration that goes on from 9/11 all the way down. So we must condemn it. We must condemn it wholeheartedly. But also, I want to caution people who may just like jump the gun. We are talking about a conflict between India and Pakistan. We had hoped that if we can get together and solve, the Middle East conflict in 2020, when President Trump signed the Abraham Accords, we thought the next one will be India and Pakistan. And we, as leaders with a moral conscience, we must make sure that we never forget that peace is the way forward, that we need to, the hearts are bleeding. I hate terrorism. If there's one thing I hate is Islamism, terrorism. I'm fighting it with everything I have. But there is one thing I want. I want peace between India and Pakistan. They are both nuclear countries. And I was just reading a report by the State Department, and it's in the archives. We're going to share it, that there are millions of Pakistanis and Indians and people in the Indo-Pak subcontinent that will be affected with not just the nuclear war. There are chemical chemical warfare that is going to come into play if we were to have a nuclear war. So our leaders in Pakistan, our leaders in India, both of them have to be very cautious. It is lives that we're talking about, and they say that it's not going to be 1 million or 6 million, 10 million lives. It's going to be 50 million lives that will be affected if we go to war. And that is serious for all of us. So we must tread with caution. We must call on responsible statements coming out of India and Pakistan. And then we can look at our neighbors. And this is, Sheikh Musa might just agree with me that, my kids are best friends are Hindus and Indians. My best friends are Hindus and Indians. And I don't want to lose them like the Muslims lost the Jewish friends and Jewish friends lost the Muslim friends in this war. Let us stay united and let us stop people from dividing us at this point. And let's be the leaders we don't have, Soraya.
Thank you. Thank you, Anila. I mean, common sense must prevail, Rumi once said, grief can be the garden of compassion. And we have to find that space and find people who will walk with us in that space. I want to open very quickly for at least 2 questions. Julie, any questions?
We haven't had any come in, but for those who are attending the webinar, you can raise your hand or put a question in the chat.
I also want to say, Soraya, that I recently met with Judah Pearl. He's the father of Daniel Pearl, who was beheaded, the journalist that was beheaded. And I asked him, I just met him a few nights ago, and I said to him, I was like, tell me what you can, what you glean from your life in terms of ways to stay resilient, And do you know what he wanted to do? He wanted to sing. And he kept singing these beautiful songs to me. And he said, this is how you get through things. You sing, And that's the one thing that we learned in Israel. There are actually 3 beautiful things that I learned from the Israeli population in terms of how to move through hard stuff. And one is through community, which is what we're doing now. We're building a community. Second thing is through song, and the third is through faith. And each one, supports the other. And so it's like, when sometimes you take a step back and you look at the whole entire, region, and you look at all the problems and you think, oh my God, this is just unfixable, But then it's like, well, we carved out an hour of our day today to come together and to get to know one another, to build bridges, and we're creating community. And I think that, these are the moments that we have to, it's like, you have a coffee, you have a cigarette. These are the moments of those, the coffee,
To what you said, Chava, this is why I've always been saying the Jewish people in Israel particularly, they have a tremendous gift of resilience and love.
Yeah.
In your movie, you highlight that so beautifully. There were people who came up and formed a WhatsApp group called Good News from Israel, to protect people from bad messages. There was another person who did a hug to a teddy bear. And there was one family. I mean, there were thousands who went to the orchards to pluck fruits. And I think Israel has been able to incredibly mobilize all these voices, hands, hearts. And I mourn that we will not find that in many places.
There's definitely a lot of grief there. And, you can feel it. There's a heaviness when you get off the airplane. Even I hear it through the phone lines when I speak to my Israeli friends and family. And there's definitely a lot of grief. But there's so much love that the love overtakes everything else.
Yes.
And like you were saying about the teddy bears, R.A. Dobular, who is one of my favorite people that I got to interview, who, spent months getting resources for refugees who were stuck in the hotels after fleeing the south and areas where missiles were being bombarded upon in the north and southern regions of Israel. And he realized that there was like a really big problem in that the children were stuck in these hotels and they needed a lot of love and they needed some attention. And he took me to one of the hotels to deliver teddy bears to kids. And it was like one of the most beautiful things. And here in Los Angeles, we recently had the fires, and there were 100,000 people that lost their homes and tens of thousands of children that lost all of their belongings and all of their toys. And one of my wonderful friends, Courtney Mizell, who started this incredible boutique in Santa Monica where she gathers all these beautiful clothes to give away to those who are, lost all their clothes in the fire. She called me and we were chatting, and I'm like, I wish we could do something like they do in Israel. Like, let's do an Operation Teddy Bear where we give teddy bears to the kids here in LA who have lost all their toys. She goes, oh, that's a great idea. I said, okay, I'll make a flyer. I'll send it to you. You send it to your WhatsApp groups. I'll send it to mine. We did that. Within literally 30 minutes, one of my friends called me and said, Chava, I have an entire warehouse of teddy bears because I used to have a business. You can have all of them. I said, well, how many are there? He's like, 13 pallets. I'm like, what am I going to do with 13 pallets? I call Courtney. She's like, I have a space on 3rd Street Promenade. It's ready and waiting. We got somebody to come and pick up all the teddy bears. 5,000 teddy bears were delivered within 3 days. 75 volunteers from all faiths came around and gave teddy bears to children across the whole entire Los Angeles basin with a little beautiful sign that said, when Mr. Rogers always used to say that when there's a crisis, you should always look for the helpers. And it's from hospitals and hotels and schools all over LA. And that to me is paying it forward. That's what I want people to get when they watch this film, is learn ways in which you can come together when there's a crisis. Pay it forward in your communities. Do the same things. Find different healers who are helping you through, your own crisis, breathe life into people, like it's enough with all of the dark conversations. Let's get around the table and having ways to heal each other, because that's really like, when I was growing up, we would always say that if you're in a dark room and you light one little candle, suddenly the room becomes flooded. That's to me what love is. It's like you could be in darkness, but you turn on that candle and man, there's no more darkness, and that to me is how we can really change the world. Just conversations like this, music, that sort of thing.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
And
that was
I want to go to
beautiful.
Sheikh Musa, who is he's the leader of the day for us, as a religious leader, to bring, to teach us the value, why we should build solidarity and unity with our Jewish communities and others. Sheikh Musa, what is your message for the Muslim world?
Well, once again, thank you so much. It has been very informative. But what I want to leave all of you is that October 7 was the act of Hamas. But immediately after October 7, what the so-called pro-Palestinian movement did was more hurtful, more painful, and more divisive than even what Hamas did. They had never ever differentiated Hamas from anybody else. They just went ahead because of their anti-Israel and some of them anti-Semite. Then they raised the flag of Palestine as if they're supporting Palestine. But what they were really doing is supporting Hamas, denying Israel, and really manifesting anti-Semitism. And I think if we can walk away and never ever repeat that mistake, I think we have done a great job. It was a great mistake, and we should not repeat it again.
Thank you so much. Yes. I think we are out of time. I'm going to ask Julie to close this, and thank you to everybody who made the time. Please reach out to each one of us, especially Sheikh Musa, who's a leader that our community needs, and then Anil Ali, and then please make provision to screen, invite Chava. Her film needs to be watched. We have to humanize this conflict We are all suffering in pain. We alone, Anila and I particularly, the pain is a lot. Because we mourn in community, we navigate this better than others would alone. So Julie, over to you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Yes,
you.
I just wanted to thank everyone for joining us today. I found this conversation so incredibly encouraging and insightful, and we hope that each of you did as well. We will be sending a follow-up email to our registrants that will include the link to the trailer, apologies for any tech difficulties, as well as information about all of our panelists and from AMWEC. We hope that you'll follow us on social media and follow our work. We're also dropping an email address in the chat, so if you would like to get in touch with any of the speakers, or if you have any questions or thoughts that come to mind, we'd love to connect with you and hear more. But on behalf of the American Muslim and Multi-Faith Women's Empowerment Council, thank you all for being here, and we hope that you'll join us for our next webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.